Hello friends, I'm MK Yadav and I'm starting a new course of economics to cover the 6 most major topics of the economics which are relevant from prelims perspective. So when the pattern of the UPSC is changing and now the UPSC is focusing more towards the current affairs components of the economics. For example, rather than asking the conventional questions related to the banking, the time liability, the demand liability, the inflation, the monetary policy, now they are shifting towards more and more questions through the current affairs based topics. For example, they are asking from the social infrastructure. Within the infrastructure, they are asking from social infrastructure. Then they are asking some of the components from the physical infrastructure. They are also asking from the topics like agriculture. They are asking from the international organization as well as the international agreements they are talking about. Then they are asking the questions from the factual perspective. For example, last year they asked about NIIF. They asked about the foreign trade facilitation agreement ratification date. So the pattern of the UPSC is changing and you have to cover holistically these 6 major topics which I'm going to cover in the class. So these topics, their relevance, the total relevance of economics from prelims perspective is roughly last year they asked 30 to 31 questions including agriculture. So out of these 31 questions, the relevance of these topics is roughly 18 to 19 questions. We are going to cover the balance of payment, then we are going to cover the international organizations and agreements. This is a major component, and then we are going to cover the fiscal policy and the public finance, the budget and all these provisions. Then we are going to discuss the Indian agriculture sector and this social infrastructure. So all these schemes, for example, education related schemes, health related schemes, these components comes under the social infrastructure of the economy. So we are going to cover this static portion as well as biased with the dovetailed with the current affairs components of this thing. Then we are going to cover the industrial and the service sector. The relevance of this particular course is no major book is going to cover these topics comprehensively. So, and even if they are covering, they are not covering it with the current affairs coverage. So we are going to cover these topics with the static portion as well as the current affairs component. So now let's discuss which all topics we are going to cover in these 6 major themes. So first we have as the balance of payment. Under this balance of payment, we are going to cover the basic concept of balance of payment. What is current account, what is capital account, what is FDI, what is FII, what is euro issues, etc., etc. What are the recent trends, what is current account deficit, what are the foreign trade policy, then we are going to discuss, and as well as how the foreign trade, the composition is changing. So we are going to cover all these topics. If a foreign trade policy mid-year review happened in last year, so we are going to cover the current affairs component as well as the static component we are going to cover. So this is going to provide a one-stop all solution for all your topics, all your doubts related to these particular units. Then the second, we are going to cover the international organizations and the agreements. We are going to cover international organizations like IMF, we have World Bank, then we have the WTO, the issues related to the WTO. For example, we have agreement on agriculture, peace clause is there, then the trade facilitation agreement is there, Doha round is there, TRIPS is there, TEPS plus is there. Then we are going to cover some other financial institutions. For example, we have Asian Development Bank, then we have the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, BRICS Bank, etc., etc. And the regional cooperation agreements. For example, we have TPP, RCP, TTIP. Every year UPSC is asking at least one question from these regional agreements. Then what is SIPA, SICA? Next, in the third unit, we are going to cover the fiscal policy and the public finance, under which we are going to cover FISC. FISC means Consolidated Fund of India. It means all the components related to the FISC. For example, we have taxation. So the basics of taxation. What is direct tax? What is indirect tax? Within the direct tax, which all type of tax we have? The corporate income tax, securities transaction tax, MAT, AMT, direct tax code, income tax. Then in the indirect tax, earlier we had this excise duty, service tax, VAT, CST. All these things we are going to discuss and how they are going to be subsumed under the GST component. So the need of the GST, the features, the challenges, the recent developments of the GST. For example, we have the e-way bill at present issue that is going. No book is going to cover these current affairs based topics, but in the class we are going to cover all these topics from the static portion. It means the need of GST as well as the various recent developments. For example, we have e-way bill. Then we are going to cover the recent tax reforms being taken by the government, and all these things will be dovetailed with the economic survey, the budget, all this information you will get in these particular topics. E-Sayog, E-Nirvan, Rapid, TRPU, TPC, FSLRC. Then we have the public finance, the meaning and the significance. Then within the budget we have the types of the deficits and all the budget. From the budget, the structure of the budget, every year roughly there is one question. Which of the following expenditure comes under revenue component, which of the following receipt comes under the revenue receipts. So such structure based question are the static portion, and then we have the current affairs based component. For example, last year they asked about in the last 10 years whether the text to GDP ratio has increased or decreased. And then we are going to discuss the recent one, the FRBM, the NK Singh committee recommendations, the acceptance by the government or not. And then we have the fiscal federalism, how the center-state relations has changed after GST, this cooperative federalism technology and all, the central sponsor scheme, we have the special category status, all these things we are going to cover in this particular unit. Then we are going to cover one of the most important topic from prelims as well as from the mains perspective is the Indian agriculture. Under this Indian agriculture, we are going to discuss the overview of the Indian agriculture. Then we are going to discuss the key issues in the agriculture sector, whether it is the irrigation component, the seeds component, whether the credit component, the extension services. These things we are going to discuss. And then the next one we have is the subsidies. So, a number of subsidies are given by the central government and the state government. The National Food Security Act, for example, the food subsidy, fertilizer subsidy, WTO, agri subsidies, etc. The procurement policies of the government. Procurement is done by the FCI. So the buffer stock issues is there, MSP is there, CIP is there, PDS issues are there. Then the Shanta Kumar committee, which was set up in 2013-14. So the recommendations of the Shanta Kumar panel we are going to discuss. Then we are going to discuss the APMC. All these things again will be dovetailed with the budget component. For example, in the budget we have the grams actually they have recommended. Then we have Operation Green. So then we have the agriculture extension services. We are going to cover these schemes. All the agriculture related schemes we are going to cover here. Then the second green revolution, the evergreen revolution, and the climate change and the sustainable agriculture actually. So these topics we are going to cover in the agriculture, but we are going to cover the topics only from the prelims perspective, so as to maximize your score, because hardly we have 3 months left. So we cannot now afford to cover the mains perspective. So we are only going to cover the prelims perspective, the factual information as well as some analytical part of this particular information. Then we have the industrial and the service sector. Actually, majority of the students, they actually don't cover this industrial and the service sector, which actually is your edge over other aspirants. So in this particular industrial and the service sector, we are going to cover the industrial development policies. We have the new industrial policies of 1991, then the disinvestment and the recent trends, the manufacturing policy, how manufacturing is good for the economy. From the mains perspective, it is different. That why manufacturing is important, why manufacturing increases the exports. But we are going to cover only from the prelims perspective, the recent initiatives, all these things. So you don't have to make notes of Make in India, startup, stand-up, ease of doing business, etc. We are going to cover these topics holistically, comprehensively from the prelims perspective. And then various service sector also. Actually, majority of the aspirants also negate this particular thing. So the service sector, the share in GDP, the capital formation, the employment, the FDI, FII and all, and the challenges the service sector is actually facing after this global financial crisis. In the next unit of infrastructure sector, we are going to cover the physical infrastructure as well as the social infrastructure. From this particular topic, you can expect a lot of question in prelims. A lot of schemes came. For example, last year they asked about Vindhyanjali, Bharatunnat and all these things we are going to discuss later on. So in this infrastructure sector, we are going to discuss the overview of the infrastructure sector, then the energy and the power sector, the transport sector. Within transport, we are going to cover the roads, the railways, the aviation, the shipping ports and all these things. And plus, we are going to cover the rural and the urban infrastructure, under which we are going to cover the Rural Mission, the smart cities, GIFT, Amrut, housing for all. Then we are going to discuss about the PPP, the Kelkar committee recommendations. So these things we are going to discuss in this infrastructure sector. So these are the 6 major themes, 6 major topics which we are going to cover. Next, let's discuss how many questions UPSC asked from all these topics in 2017 only. So from balance of payment, they asked roughly 2 questions. One was the domestic content requirement related question. And the second one they asked about the trade facilitation agreement, which is related to the WTO. So here comes the majority of the students were not able to actually make this thing or not able to recall this particular, the third statement. First and second was a simple statement. The third is a major statement. So here comes the relevance of the current affairs components being dovetailed with the static portion of your knowledge. Then from the international organizations and the agreements, UPSC asked 3 questions. For example, the global infrastructure facility they asked. And then the second question they asked related to the national intellectual property rights policy, which came last year. So from this policy also they asked one particular question. And then they ask, so this question is being dovetailed with the Doha round actually, Doha development agenda. So now they are not asking the direct question. They are asking the static component of the Doha round dovetailed with this particular national intellectual property rights policy which is in the current affairs. Then the third question was related to the global gap index. Every year UPSC is asking a question from this indices. So we will give you a huge list and then we are going to cram this particular list in the class. So roughly you have to cram only 15 indices. So these 15 index we are going to cover in the class holistically, and I'll ensure that you are going to remember these indices in the exam. Then from the fiscal policy and the public finance, this is a highly conceptual topic under which you need to understand the basics of the economy. So this question they ask, tax to revenue as a percentage of GDP has steadily. Each and every word is having one significance in such questions. These questions actually make or break your selection in the prelims. So what is the meaning of the steadily? They are talking about the tax revenue. It means the direct taxes, indirect taxes, everything they are talking about. Whether they are asking only about the central government or the general government. These things you have to remember when you are solving such questions. The second question is related to goods and services tax. So again, this is a very conceptual based question. The need of the GST etc. is going to solve this particular problem. Then we have the third question which was related to the current affairs component of this public finance unit, that is the prohibition of the Benami Property Transaction Act 1988. All the acts which are related to these topics which we are going to cover in the class. Then from the Indian agriculture, first they asked about the static question related to this agriculture. Then the second question they asked about the current affairs component, the soil health card. The third question they asked about this particular National Agriculture Market Scheme, the ENAM scheme which came last year by the present NDA government. Then in the next unit of the social sector and the physical, from the infrastructure sector, majority of the questions were from the social infrastructure. One question was related to the National Nutrition Mission. So this National Nutrition Mission, this year they can ask from the National Nutrition Strategy. Then second was related to the National Skill Qualification Framework. Again the question from the social infrastructure, from the education, from the skill sector. Then they asked about the prior learning scheme, the recognition of prior learning scheme. Again from the social infrastructure. Then they asked about the Unnat Bharat Abhiyan. Again social infrastructure. So the relevance, the need of to cover the social infrastructure from exam perspective has increased. But no major book, no major institute cover these particular things. Then the sixth question was from the Smart Hackathon 2017. Actually this topic does not come here, but we are going to cover this in smart cities. So you can negate one of the options in this particular topic, that is the Smart Hackathon 2017. Then from the last unit of industrial and the service sector, last year they asked two questions. One question was highly factual question, whether this NIIF is having a corpus of 4 lakh crores or 40,000 crore, and whether it comes to the Niti Aayog or not. Then the second question they asked is related to this liberalization policies after 1991. Again an analytical based question which they asked. So these are the 19 questions. The total relevance of economics from exam perspective is 30 to 31. Out of this 30 to 31, these 6 units they hold 18 to 20% of this particular year total number of questions in UPSC. This is the relevance of these 6 topics, and we are going to cover these 6 topics in just 6 sessions, 4 hours each, and I'm going to use all the pedagogy which is available. I'm going to dictate in the class, I'm going to give you the Xerox, I'm going to draw the diagrams on the board, as well as I'm going to use the PPT driven class. So all the pedagogy available, I'm going to use it. Next, to enroll for this particular course, you can join us offline as well as you can join us online. Offline, the classes are available at Mission IAS. You can call on this particular number, as well as for online registration, you can log on to flavido.com, and under this flavido.com you will see this particular course. You can register it. We are also starting a new course for the current affairs component. This is the second batch of our intensive news analysis. Is going to focus only on the prelims component, and it is a crash course. The details are available on both iasforsure.com as well as the details are available on the flavido.com. This particular course is going to cover the current affairs of last from July to May 10th. We are going to cover all the current affairs which is relevant from exam perspective. First, one of the booklet of this particular prelims primer, either you can download from the IAS for sure download section, or you can download through the description of this particular video. Okay, thanks guys.